And welcome back to Face the Nation, page 2. Joining us now, the former deputy director of the CIA, Michael Morell. He also served on that advisory panel that made the recommendations last month about what changes would be needed at the National Security Agency. Mr. Morell, thank you for joining us this morning. Good to be here, Bob. I want to ask you first, Chairman Rogers made some interesting disclosures this morning suggesting that there is some reason to believe the Russians may have been helping Edward Snowden, and also expressing real concern about safety for the coming Olympics. Just give me your reaction to that.
So I share the chairman's concern about what the Russian intelligence services may be doing with Mr. Snowden. I don't have any particular evidence. But one of the things that I point to when I talk about this is that the disclosures that have been coming recently are very sophisticated in their content and sophisticated in their timing, almost too sophisticated for Mr. Snowden to be deciding on his own. And seems to me he might be getting some help.
And what about the coming Olympics? Are you concerned about the lack of cooperation that the Russians seem to be giving us on security?
So there's a long history of cooperation between nations who are hosting an Olympics and the United States government and the United States intelligence community in particular, and we did not get that cooperation with the Russians. So I share the chairman's concern about the safety of the Olympics going forward.
Why do you think that is? Is it just the Russians being the Russians, or is there something else here?
I think fundamentally they don't want to admit that they don't have complete control here and that they might need some help.
Let's talk about the president's speech. You were on the panel that made recommendations. How many did you make? What, 40?
46.
46 recommendations on things that could be done. You heard the president's speech. What do you think the challenge is now for him?
I think the president said two very important things. One was that the threats to this nation are significant, that intelligence has never been more important in dealing with those threats, that the men and women of the NSA are patriots, that the 215 program was legal and fully authorized and there wasn't any abuse. And the program needs to continue for the protection of the nation. That was one thing he said. The other thing he said was that there is a potential risk here to privacy and civil liberties that we need to take seriously. And American history has plenty of examples of why we need to take it seriously. And I think the changes that he announced were significant. Some of them will take some time to be implemented, but some of them are in place today as we speak right here. And one is the requirement to get a court order to query the 215 database. I think the real challenge going forward, Bob, is that there are many ways to square this circle. There are many ways to accomplish both the national security piece of this and the privacy and civil liberties piece. Some of those ways will put one of those two more at risk than other ways. And I think the challenge here is for the administration and the Congress to find the best approach that minimizes the impact on national security as we work to improve privacy and civil liberties.
Do you, Chairman Rogers has said, and said again this morning, there have been no abuses. Senator Udall says there has. Do you know of any abuses?
So there has been a handful of cases, literally a handful, where NSA employees have looked into the database inappropriately, looked at boyfriends or girlfriends. In every one of those cases, they were dealt with appropriately, and I believe actually some of them may have been fired. But that's the limited abuse that has taken place. There has been no systematic abuse. There has been no political abuse. It has been minor, very minor.
Do you, why did your panel recommend that this great trove of telephone numbers, this giant phone book that the NSA has, why did you recommend that be put in private hands? And I ask that in light of the recent messes that have come up with Target and also with Neiman Marcus, where all of this information has been hacked into. Why isn't the government better capable of protecting this stuff than private?
The government The government in the NSA case showed it was not capable of protecting classified information. And I happen to know some industries in the private sector who do a phenomenal job of protecting their data, financial institutions, for example. So I think the government actually has some things it can learn from the private sector about how to protect data.
What do you think is the most immediate thing that needs to be done right here? What's the first thing the president needs to do?
I think he's done it, which is to require a warrant for NSA to query the database.
And how do you keep that from slowing down this process? There might be some times when you come upon information, you need to act on it right now.
Right, and there is an emergency provision so that if you need to act on it immediately, you can bypass the court and go query the data and have the court look at it later. So there is that emergency provision. Now I know that Chairman Feinstein and Chairman Rogers of the intelligence committees have pointed out that some cases it's taken 9 days to get things done. That's too long. The court's got to move faster, and that's one of the things that has to be looked at is how do we make sure the court can move as fast as it can move.
I want to get you on record for one thing, because there seems to be some disagreement. Some say that if the government had the capabilities before 9/11 that it has now, it could have prevented 9/11.
Yes.
Do you think that's true?
Yes, I do. And quite frankly, I've been criticized a little bit for saying that. And here's what I meant, Bob, when I said that. If the program were in place before 9/11, I believe it would prevent 9/11. And by the program, I mean two things. I mean NSA's ability to query the database, which would have allowed NSA to find one of the 9/11 hijackers in California, and the part of the program where NSA shares such information with the FBI. If both of those pieces had been in place, 9/11 would have been prevented by this program.
How badly do you think our national security has been harmed by the disclosures by Edward Snowden?
I believe this is the worst disclosures in the history of the U.S. intelligence community. I agree with Chairman Rogers that it will cost billions and billions of dollars to repair the damage.
And are they repairing the damage? Are there steps going on now? Are they doing things in different ways? And I guess the other part of that question is, are the other guys doing things in a different way because of these disclosures?
So even before I left government in August, we were watching the adversaries change their approach as a result of the disclosures. So they moved very quickly to adjust to the collection that we were doing against them. And I don't know it, but I would imagine my former colleagues are working aggressively to adjust as well.
How has this affected the morale of people who do this kind of work?
I think it has affected the morale in a negative way, particularly at NSA. I thought one of the most effective things the President did in the speech was to compliment the work of the men and women of NSA. And I think it was very important for the country to hear that, and I think it was very important for the employees of NSA to hear that from their Commander-in-Chief.
Mr. Morell, I want to thank you for being with us this morning, and we're going to see a lot more of you starting tomorrow. Mike Morell will be joining CBS News as a contributor to all our broadcasts. So welcome aboard, and we'll be back in 1 minute with our panel.